You walk into a supermarket with the exact same shopping list you had a year ago: bread, detergent, vegetables. Nothing luxurious. But when your items are scanned, the total at the register is drastically higher again, even though the news keeps insisting that inflation is dropping. For decades, the global economy operated like an invisible discount applied directly to your paycheck. Globalization meant that even if your wages stayed flat, the purchasing power of your income stretched further because the cost of everyday goods kept falling. That discount relied on a highly specific set of conditions. Companies manufactured goods halfway across the world to access cheap labor, shipped those products using incredibly cheap energy, and assumed that global peace would keep the ocean trade routes perfectly secure. To make everything as inexpensive as possible, corporations stripped away backup inventories and redundant supply lines. Having spare capacity tied up cash, so it was viewed strictly as corporate waste. This hyper-optimized system reveals its cracks the moment a single condition fails. When one container ship wedges itself into a canal, or a trade route becomes a combat zone, the lack of backup capacity ensures that every local disruption becomes a global price hike. A broken global system does not empty your bank account all at once. Instead, it drains your wealth through a delayed, entirely invisible two-front assault on your household budget. The first blow happens quietly, driven by the massive delay between a global shock and physical reality. When a crucial waterway like the Strait of Hormuz becomes dangerous, the flow of energy and raw materials stops. Financial markets react instantly. Oil traders adjust their positions in minutes. If a ceasefire is negotiated a few weeks later, the television networks late declare the crisis resolved based on those dropping market prices. But physical supply chains do not move at the speed of an algorithm. A farmer has to buy fertilizer months before planting. If a geopolitical shock made that fertilizer scarce, the farmer pays a premium. That cost is baked into the harvest, which eventually dictates the price of the flour inside your bread. Similar delays happen across heavy industry. Refineries produce petrochemicals, the foundational chemical inputs required to make food packaging, detergent bottles, clothing, and electronics. It takes months for higher material costs to chew through these sprawling, complex networks. To soften the blow on the final sticker price, corporations often deploy shrinkflation. They quietly reduce the packaging size, cut the quality of the ingredients, or shrink the portions you receive. By the time that final product actually reaches the checkout counter, the original global conflict is entirely out of the news cycle. The cause is invisible, but your wallet absorbs the entire cascading cost. Then comes the second hit. As the costs of groceries and household goods climb, central banks step in to fight the inflation by deploying their primary weapon: raising interest rates. The bitter irony is that higher interest rates cannot fix physical bottlenecks. They do not manufacture more fertilizer, and they cannot magically reopen blocked shipping lanes. Central banks fight inflation by actively destroying consumer demand. By pushing the interest rate up, they force your purchasing power down. That policy immediately infects your household debt, rapidly inflating the carrying costs of your mortgage, auto loan, and credit cards. You are now trapped in a double assault. You are paying drastically more for basic survival goods, while simultaneously paying higher interest to finance the debt required to float those exact rising costs. This dynamic explains why news reports celebrating falling inflation rarely translate into relief for your bank account. The term is a statistical trap. This chart shows the mathematical reality. If the total cost of your monthly groceries jumps from a baseline of $100 up to $120, inflation is severe. If that bill rises more slowly to $122 the next year, the inflation rate has mathematically fallen. But your bill has not shrunk. You never return to the old baseline. That massive gap is simply the permanent floor you now have to live on. The global economy is actively shifting away from a system optimized for cheapness toward a system optimized for resilience. That requires domestic factories, extensive redundant supplies, and military escorts to secure contested oceans. Security and stability are no longer included for free. In this more fragmented world, trade is becoming more domestic and safer, but those protections come with a permanent, visible increase in the cost of everything we buy. The resulting squeeze on wealth does not distribute itself evenly. A wealthy household can absorb this double assault by delaying a luxury purchase, skipping a vacation, or simply drawing from existing savings. A lower-income household allocates almost its entire paycheck to non-negotiable basics: shelter, utilities, food, and the transportation required to keep a job. You cannot negotiate with your winter heating bill, and you cannot opt out of your daily commute. For a long time, the continuous influx of incredibly cheap imported goods served as a band-aid. It stretched the purchasing power of the average worker and masked the systemic weakness of stagnant wages. When the raw cost of survival takes every dollar of a paycheck, the household loses more than its savings. It loses the financial margin that once provided the freedom to choose how to live.